Amen. Let's read the Bible together. Today's passage is from Judges chapter 8, verses 22 through 28. We are going to read book of Judges, chapter 8, verses 22 through 28. I'm going to read using New International Version, as you see on the screen. If you have a different version, you can also feel free to read your own version along with me. Let's read Judges chapter 8, verses 22 through 28. The Israelites said to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon told them, "I will not rule over you, nor my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." And he said, "I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." It was a custom of Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. They answered, "We will be glad to give them." So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels. This is about 20 kilograms, it's about 45 pounds. Not counting the ornaments, the pendants, and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. This Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise his head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. Do you like superhero movies? Some superhero movies, I can name it, will be any movies from Marvel, or it can be from DC Comics. Anyone here big fan of superhero movies, or do you know any friends or yourself as a superhero fan? I used to watch every single movie that Marvel released because I thought it was cool, and I thought I can make better friends by talking about the stories. And I still like old superheroes movies, but I kind of stopped it. I was thinking about and asking myself, why was I so into superhero movies? And my answer was because I felt some excitement or some catharsis when the heroes defeated the villains and saved the earth or the universe or human beings. But as time passed, as I'm getting a little bit older, a question began to arise inside of me. I began to ask, when superheroes are fighting, you can say they are destroying buildings. When I say they are destroying buildings, they are not only destroying buildings, but they're also crashing the cars, trains, and the whole city. And I began to ask myself, what would happen if there was any human individual still remaining in the building side? There would be dead. Then I began to ask myself about this. How long it would take to rebuild those buildings? Which insurance companies is going to cover this? How much money should they get for should they be compensated for the property damages? The movies are not covering those things. And maybe we are not really interested in it. We only want to see the villains get defeated. We want only to see our enemies get defeated and destroyed in front of us. But we don't really care about what's coming after it. Once the heroes go away, we will need to spend a lot of money, and we will need to miss our friends or family members who were also killed during the battlefields, but we do not really care about it because that does not give us any excitement. And another question that I often ask is this, especially after watching Avengers. Now the worst villain, Thanos, is gone. The world now has peace. Then what are they going to do to survive? What would superheroes do after all the villains die and all the crises are gone? they need to go back to their ordinary lives. There's one characteristic or trait that we often overlook when we think about the heroes. You know, when I was in Korea, a lot of several older generations around me, why is there no more younger heroes popping up from your generation? And then one of the answers I provided them is because we are not in the moment of crisis. The reason why we need heroes, meaning that we are going through some crisis. We often see heroes from the worst because in the worst we need heroes. We need to look for some politicians who can save us from the economic crisis because we are going through some difficult times. Heroes only need when there is no more peace or there are some time of difficulties that we cannot overcome with our own strength. And my question is, how would we live when there is no more need of the superheroes? Gideon in this story was depicted as a superhero because he's the one who saved Israel people out of the hands of Midians. He was able to recruit 32,000 people at the beginning, but it ended up going to 11,000. It ended up becoming 300, and with this 300 soldiers, he was able to defeat the armies. If you read Judges chapter 6 and 7, this army was not just an army of Midian. There were some armies of Midianites. There were some armies of Amalekites. There was also a group of armies from an eastern region. It was not just the Midianites. Gideon and 300 warriors, 301 people, they were able to defeat thousands and hundreds of the enemies without really actually fighting against them. But here we also need to the following question. Now there is no more common enemy for them, and how would they survive? If Gideon was called to defeat the enemies of Israel and to deliver Israel people out of the hands of Midianites, then we have to ask, so how would Gideon live after his calling was completed? That is something what I want to discuss today. If we only focus on that Gideon was only called for this specific action, we do not have an answer for this question. If we only think about God is only calling us for this one specific mission, then whenever the mission is completed, or if the mission fails, then we have to ask this question: is God's calling no more for us anymore? So there's no more God's calling for me? That's why I highlighted the second point from the last week. God's calling is not actually about what we are doing. God's calling is not actually where we have to be, because God's calling is very essence is asking us, who should we become before the Lord? And how do we define who we are is what God's calling is really about. God's calling is about who are you going to be, and who are you going to be surround yourself with. And God's calling is also about how are you going to present yourself to other people. So let's think about how Gideon was called. Gideon was called to be a person who saved Israel from the hands of the Midianites. And when I say he was called to save, meaning he was called to recruit people, that when he decided to obey this command from God, God actually helped him to recruit people. And then God did not only help him, but God also helped him to sort out some people, as verses 46 say. As chapter 7, verses 46 say. But the Lord said to Gideon, there are still too many people. Take them down to the water, and I will send them out for you there. If I say this one shall go with you, he shall go. But if I say this one shall not go with you, he shall not go. So Gideon took the men down to the water. Then there the Lord told him, separate those who lap the water with their tongue as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink. 300 of them drank from the cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. So last week when we talked about this verse, I said, when we are called and then when we decide to follow God's calling, God is not only calling us, but God is also calling us other people to join and become a group to arise as the army of God, right? So, and then when I am obeying to God's calling, God is not only calling me, but that God is also calling other people. By God calling all of us, God is going to restore the place where we are right now. And then the second point I shared is this. Then what happened to the people who had to go home? Didn't God call them as well? But I also shared with you that God also called all the other people. God is actually calling all of us to become something, and become something can change depending on the time. God sometimes is calling us to be a soldier, but God sometimes is calling us to be a mom or dad. God sometimes is calling us to be a student, but God is sometimes calling us to be a teacher or guardian. God sometimes is calling us to be a farmer, but God sometimes calls us to harvest. So I shared with you that last week. We should not focus on what we are doing right now, because as I said earlier, who are we going to be? Who are we going to define ourselves is more important when we think about God's calling. And with remembering this, let's think about what is going to happen when we accept God's calling, and what attitude should we have to follow the God's calling. So number one is this. In order for us to follow God's calling, we need patience. Yes, God is calling us to be someone, but for us, in order to be that person, we need patience. And let's read chapter 8, verse 4 together. Gideon and his 300 men, exhausted yet keeping up the pursuit, came to the Jordan and crossed it. So a lot of people might have different definition of patience. But if we think about this, one common definition of patience is this: we endure. And then we have to ask this question. Human beings are not good with dealing with pain. Human beings are not good with dealing with difficulties. And how can we endure? We can endure if we all have a greater will waiting for us. If we know if we can endure this difficult time, if we are going to receive something better in the future, we can endure that. That's what the patience is about. We are enduring something right now in order to achieve a greater good in our lives. And then greater good is something from God. I've never been in a battle, or I've never been in a war before. But when I was in the army, August 2015, it was about 3 months since I left the army. There was a near-war moment in Korea. I think I've shared this experience before. For most of you who are not here when I shared it in a personal space, so there was in August 2015, what happened was there was a wood mine exploded in South Korea, which was installed by North Korean armies. And then South Korea did something about it, and the North Korean army shot the rockets in the South Korean territory. So what ended up happening? So South Korea now started preparing the war because they took it as an attack against our territory. So for the first time in the history of my unit, we mobilized with all the ammunition, and we camped for a week waiting for an order to fire. So because we knew our weapons can kill up to 10,000 to 20,000 people with our rockets, we thought we were preparing the war. And furthermore, the reason why I thought the war was really near was that one of the things that my commander asked me to do is to check every soldier is calling their parents before we mobilize. Then right before we mobilized, the commander gathered all of us and gave us a speech, and he said, we are going to go out to the field, we are going to shoot the rockets, and we are going to kill all the enemies, and then we are going to win from this battle. And then we were so super hyped from it, because that's how soldiers work in Korea. And when I think about this, and when I reflect on this memory, do you know what the biggest emotions that I had and that all my friend soldiers were sharing? Interestingly, it was not fear or anxiety. It started with fear. What if we get killed? What if our family get killed? Yes, that fear and anxiety does exist for 1 or 2 hours, And then ever since that emotion goes away, the biggest feeling that you are going to feel is fatigue. You're tired. The only thing you think about is, if we need to shoot the rockets, let us shoot it. If we need to kill the enemies, let us kill. All we want is to let it end. Then all we want is to go back to our base and sleep. Interestingly, that was the biggest common emotions that all soldiers shared during that moment. It's because war, fear and anxiety caused by war makes us feel fatigue. That's what Gideon and his 300 soldiers were going through. They not only waited for so long, they also fought. They've been fighting against their enemies, so they were tired. When the Bible says they were tired, they were not only physically tired, but they were also emotionally drained, because if you keep seeing the blood, that makes you feel so tired. But they never stopped. Despite their exhaustion, they continued to pursue the enemy. And do you know why? Because they knew this word does not belong to them, but because they knew this word belonged to God. Because they were called to become a soldier during this time, they were able to complete this mission. But that was not it. Emotional tiredness and physical tiresome was not it. If you read chapter 8, verses 5 to 6, this is what Gideon records. He said to the men of Sukkot. Sukkot was a land of Gad tribe, G-A-D, Gad tribe. Gad was a group of Israel people too. So Gideon was a descendant of Israel, and also these people from Sukkot were also the Israel people, and this is what they said. So Gideon is asking to the men of Sukkot, because he was tired, he was hungry, so this is what he asked. Give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I'm still pursuing Ziba and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Sukkot said, their brothers are saying this to the tiring soldiers. Do you already have the hands of Zerba and Zolom in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops? So if you look up the map, I didn't prepare the map this week. If you look up the map, the Gad is the border between Israel and Midian. So now people of Sukkot is thinking, if Israel people led by Gideon is losing this battle, for sure the Midianite soldiers, Midianite army will revenge on them. So even their brothers, even the brothers of Gideon, even Gideon's people are not trusting him fully. Even the brothers and sisters of Gideon are not on board with him. Think about it. You've been fighting the battles for so long, then you are so tired, but you are using all your energy to finish this battle, and then you are not hearing any encouraging words from other people around you. That's what Gideon was going through. But they did not give up. This is what we call patience. When I say patience, sometimes all the surroundings, people around us may be against us. They may mock us. They may be laughing at us, because even though we are following God's calling, things may not go well. Because when we are following God's calling, sometimes God is calling us, God is taking us to the point of disappointment sometimes. And then when we are in the time of disappointment, we will feel disappointed, and then we will feel lonely, because all people around us will not be helpful as the people of Sukkot were to Gideon. But if we know who we truly are, we can still pursue the calling of God, because we do know once we move forward, at the end, we will discover who we are before God. So in order for us to complete God's calling, we need patience. That's why God's call is lifelong, not one time. We often think, okay, now we completed this mission, then God's calling is completed. But that's not. When God is calling us to do something or to be someone, God is not only calling us for that, but God is also calling us for the future as well. And let's read these 3 verses to talk about it a little bit more. Verses 22 through 24 say this. The Israelites said to Gideon. So now Israel defeated the Midianites, and then they are asking this. Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian. But Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And then he changes his answer here. And he said, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder. It was a custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. So before we think about this one, let me just explain why the Bible says they were wearing the gold earrings. If you look at the map, the land where Midianites were living looked like a crescent, like a moon. And then they believe when the moon is bright, their land can become very fertile. So people in the media, they worship Midian, they worship the god of moon. So when they're talking about earrings, gold earrings, they were wearing gold moon earrings. So what Israel people did after they killed the Midianites, they took all the earrings from them because those earrings were actually their gods. So what Israel people did after they defeated the Ishmaelites, Midianites, what they did, they took all the earrings from them. This symbolizes that we defeated your king as well. That's what this earring is about. Anyway, if you remember the earlier chapter, if you have not, let me read this. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Why did God call Gideon? God did not call Gideon to be a king. God did not call Gideon to be a mighty leader of Israel. God called Israel so that Israel people can return to God and worship God only after seeing how God is working through Gideon. We have to remember this. God is calling us so that other people around us can see how God is working through us so that they can return to God. God is not calling us to be glorified other people or to be sitting on the top of other people. God is calling us so that we can lead everyone to God. And however, Gideon started forgetting about this calling, and this is what starts happening. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jar, grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands the trumpets they were to blow. They shouted, "A sword for the Lord, this is good." And they start saying, "And for Gideon." What it means is this. From one point, we don't know when, Gideon started sharing the God's seats and God's glory. And then we call it, Gideon started stealing God's glory by becoming like God among Israel people. We read verses 23, 24. When Israel people asked, "Gideon, you are a great warrior. Can you be our king?" Gideon says, No. I'm not called to be a king. But if you read the following verses, his answer is pretty interesting. He says, "Well, instead of making me a king, actually give me the gold and give me the garments that you stole from Midianites and give it to me. I'll take that." And then after Gideon took all these belongings, what he made was an ephod. Ephod was a garment that the priests were wearing. Now on the ephod, even though today's passage is not talking about, ephod had something called ummim and thummim. This is something Israel people used to know God's will. We don't know how it looks. We don't know how they ask God's will or ask for God's will using this. We don't know how. However, that's what they used to know God's will. And this is what Gideon did. He took everything, and he took some of gold, some of garments from Israel people, and he made a garment for the priest for him. That means he is now a priest. However, priest is only from the tribe of Levite. Gideon is not from the tribe of Levite. He cannot be a priest. But he decided to be a priest, that he made this gorgeous and luxurious effort and then put it in his hometown. Remember, effort was used to seek God's will. So what Gideon did here, he made a system. Even though he did not want to be a king, he made a system so the whole Israel can come to him to ask God's will. Now he became a king. Now he became a center of Israel, and this ended up leading Israel people to sin against God, because now Israel people started worshiping this ephod. Gideon was called to lead people to God so that they can return from the idolatry. God has called Gideon so that he can show other people our God is the only true God. If you want to be saved, if you want to be flourished, you only need to return to God, because he is the only one who can give you the ultimate satisfaction. What Gideon ended up doing is, no, actually you need to listen to me, because I'm the one who delivered you out of the hands of Midian. Dear brothers and sisters, what makes us getting apart from God is something big or grandiose. We start getting away from God. We start stepping away from God. We start getting distant from God because of the very small things that we do in our lives. At first, when people said, for God, for Gideon, maybe he felt good. But this one moment of disobedience opened the gate to our enemy. We often think when the devil is coming to us to tempt us, they are coming into a super mighty Luke. But that's not how our enemies are tempting us. They come to us in the shape of friends. They come to us in the shape of media and say, this one thing is going to be fine. That when we start accepting those small things little by little, we begin to, at the end we realize we were actually sitting on the chair that was prepared for God. Do you know how we can break the big rocks? We cannot beat the big rocks with our fists, but a drop of water can break the rock. If you can keep dropping the water drops on the same spot, it's going to make a gap, crack. And as the water goes into those cracks, the rock will end up getting shattered into pieces. Even though we have a strong faith in God, even though we are a super strong Christian in our eyes right now, if we allow this one small thing enter our heart, we will end up forgetting about God's call and live for our own. That's why Peter, in his first letter, said this: be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. The reason why it is so important to know that God's calling is not just a one-time, but it's a lifelong. It tells us it's a long race. If you have running in a marathon, it's really important to pace. I competed yesterday at a local competition. One of the last workouts we did was a 14-minute long workout. Well, I was able to get the third from the workout. And then here's one thing I learned from this experience. When you are doing a longer workout, I finished the very first movement last. But I was able to finish earlier than anyone else because I paced it. We often try to sprint in our faith journey. When God pours out some great passion in us, We want to go out, share this passion with other people. But you know what? We have to be really careful when God is pouring passion in us, because with that passion, we can hurt other people. That's why we need some time of disciplines. That's why we need some time of discernments with other people. That's why the community is important. But another thing is this. In our faith journey, sometimes we feel like we are starting late than anyone else. Or sometimes we feel like, well, some other people are going way ahead, and our race is getting delayed because of our personal issues. Could be our financial issues. It could be the issues with our children. Could be issues with our careers. But in the eyes of God, we have to remember this is a long race. You can start late. But if you cannot finish the race, what's the point of it? But even though you are starting late, if you can finish the race and complete the race, and God says, "Good job, my beloved servant," that is going to be the best ending we can see. So over the last 3 weeks, I've been talking about the story of Gideon. God called him when he was in the midst of the suffering. Then when he first obeyed God, God recruited other people for him, and he was able to defeat his enemies as God called him for. However, as he opened the gate to the devil, just a small gate, little by little, the enemy started creating cracks inside of him, and then he ended up leading people to another sin. God is calling us to do something, or to be someone today for each of you today. Maybe you are in the middle of your race. Maybe you haven't started your race yet, or maybe you have already started your race. But remember this. Even though it feels like you are way ahead of everyone else, even though you may feel like you are way behind everyone else, it does not matter at the end. Because our goal is to finish this race together. So let's not boast ourselves even though we are ahead of everyone. Let's not feel bad about ourselves even though we are way behind. Because if we follow God one step by step, one day at a time, we will realize that we are at the goal line, the finish line with God, and God is going to embrace us, saying, "Great job, my beloved servant." So as we're thinking about the sermon, I want us to think about this question. What does it mean that we steal the glory of God? Have we done that? Or are we doing it? What does that mean? And what can we learn from the failure of Gideon's life, or Gideon? And what should we change in our lives to avoid repeating the failures that Gideon made? I want to challenge us to think about these questions. And if we can find or come up with a list of the things that we can work on, not to repeat these failures, I hope we can make those changes in our lives. It doesn't need to be at once. We can make changes, small changes at a time, because our race is long.